Humans struggle a lot to keep grounded when we are faced with the incredible nature of extraordinary states of consciousness like DMT gods. They are such an intense experience that you must probably have lived it to truly know what it's like. So I've taken psychedelics over 30 times by now, and I've had really, really odd encounters. I know that psychedelics are capable of doing some unfathomably crazy stuff, but I personally have never taken DMT before. Instead, I've obsessed over the mechanics of these states and studied people who have done hundreds of trips, and I've helped others who couldn't integrate their own incredible psychedelic experience into a more grounded human lived reality. So I have a lot of knowledge about psychedelics, but DMT, I feel like I've studied mostly from afar, from what people have talked about and what I've been able to help them with, even within my framework. So the real difficulty is to not lose your mind and start worshiping DMT entities. And it might sound very silly to you if you've never had an intense psychedelic experience before, or if you have had just always very grounded experiences. Because I'm under no illusion that even if I can explain the mechanistical nature of reality, that the moment I would be confronted with a deity presence in a psychedelic trip, my entire epistemological framework about how reality functions will collapse. Because this is what these entities really are. They are exactly what collapses your epistemological framework, and it makes you meet something that seems like it is beyond you. It seems it is beyond you because the computation required for you to envision such deities in these psychedelic spaces is so much more complex, interconnected, and higher intelligent than what your normal human consciousness allows for. The question always is the entity that I'm seeing, like this DMT entity, like a real being outside of my conscious perception? Or is it part of myself or part of my conscious projection? And what I know from my own personal experience with intense psychedelics, that you oftentimes do get the sense that there's an other intelligent present, like something with a higher computation ability, because the way the visual field and your mind rarefies your experience in these moments seem like as if you're overclocking the brain, and now suddenly you're seeing connections that your sober mind couldn't see before, and now the reality feels more real than it did before because you're doing higher levels of cognitive computation. And from there, the sense emerges that you are really interacting with an other intelligence because it is not something that you thought yourself capable of creating. So, in this model, the brain is a giant supercomputer that rarefies and models reality, and then through a substance like DMT, gets, yeah, the system overclocked so that it can even see five-dimensional geometrical shapes. The thing is that to just say it's just a drug ignores the real evidence, like scientific evidence of what consciousness is capable of. Because it doesn't really matter if it is a real DMT god or just a projection of your own mind. Because within the moment of the experience, what is being presented is going to seem absolutely real to you. So this is why a lot of people, when they come of very intense psychedelic trips, their epistemological view of reality needs to shift because they've witnessed now a reality that is so much more complex than normal, ordinary human life, like exponentially more complex. And it felt more real than the normal human experience normally feels. So it's like you're waking up from a dream and then you wake into your life. And the moment this happens, it's obvious that you were just dreaming before. Because yeah, this reality, this physical reality feels way more solid. On psychedelics, what can happen is that you experience exactly the same effect. Now your own normal human life seems obviously like a dream, and what lies beyond it is now the actual reality. This points to the idea that whatever we perceive as reality is also just an a configuration within our human brain, and even the sense of realness is adjustable within consciousness. Now, this means that I just need to put your mind into the precise configuration necessary for you to believe that gods are real or DMT gods are real, and you're going to believe it. And there's not really a way around this, because you are just a highly complex biological operation, like a machinery that processes reality from inputs and outputs and verifies its existence. And at least for the biological organism, all of this is made to survive. But when you take DMT or hype psychedelic, then suddenly survival isn't really on the table anymore. From this point of view, you might actually even feel like you already died, and now you're in some sort of afterlife. So whatever mechanism rarefies existence in this moment cannot be bound to survival anymore, because the entire survival system kind of went offline. And then still, you have stories of people seeing machine elves, which is the typical cliche, and they show geometrical objects that are impossible in three-dimensional space. And it is not possible to imagine this, right? When I say this, it sounds like delusional madness fueled by drugs. But it doesn't change the fact that if you are in these experiences, you're going to witness things that for the sober human mind seems absolutely impossible, but for the real, let's say, reality conscious mind or interested mind sees that whatever gap there was between normal human physical reality and infinite consciousness is also merely imaginary. Now, with this overwhelm of this incredible divine-like feeling, and this feeling that you're seeing an entity so much more complex than you, it feels most natural to then project an identity onto this being that goes beyond your normal human intellect. In non-psychedelic terms, this might also just be an angel. When you look at old religious texts or prophets having contact with angels, it is pretty much the same vibe. Something more intelligent mystically reveals to you something like a truth of the universe, or just a phenomenological experience that you cannot really make sense of, and then you project an identity like an angel, because it is the way the body automatically computes such an event. It's a human way to make sense of something that just doesn't make sense. Now, I kind of strip the divine component away, because people wonder, okay, so how can you say all of this stuff and then not believe there's something genuinely divine happening there? Like, a lot of people who are very ungrounded in their psychedelic experience cling to the overwhelm of it, and they create a meaningful story of what this entity encounter means for them. And it happens pretty much automatically. It's not something that you really control. When you see a DMT jester and it laughs at you because you take yourself too seriously, and if it's like an entity encounter, well, then once you come back to your normal human life, this will be quite jarring, or you have to integrate it. Like, okay, am I taking myself too seriously? Is this my subconscious mind telling me something? So you will kind of fall into the frame of the story that is being woven there. But the ability to stay grounded depends on how good can you separate the phenomenological experience from the content of experience. Phenomenologically means that how does it feel like to be in this experience? You might, for example, see smells or touch colors. These are experiences that don't make any sense in normal, ordinary consciousness, but in psychedelic states, they do make sense. Now, can you experience this and be in awe of that experience without creating a narrative about there actually being something there that you're touching or smelling or seeing? For example, you might see a flying pink elephant during a DMT trip, and now you're in the flying pink elephant realm, and the elephant comes and tells you that you have been a very good person, and therefore you are allowed entry into the mechanical machine elf elephant realm. Now, is this actually happening? Or is it a production of the mind? And since there are a lot of archetypical visions that we humans have in these DMT spaces, machine elves are the biggest cliche, you might think, okay, so there is some sort of truth there, but it might actually be more about the human psyche than some external, truth that you're sort of accessing. And now here is where it gets very interesting, because I would first and foremost argue that, of course, you must be interacting with your human psyche, because you have taken a substance, the substance is altering your mind, and from this alteration, you're now seeing something in some other realm. But it is literally not possible for you to not also be a human having taken a drug. So the interface that you're interacting with implies that you've taken a substance, implies that you're having a mind with which to interpret this experience. So you must be moving through your own mind in some form. If not, you would be dead. But there's also a caveat here, because the experience that comes afterwards presents itself as so real and so significant often that to just say it is only happening within my own mind is very dismissive, because right now this interaction is also just happening through your own mind. There's literally nothing that has ever happened outside of your mind as far as you are concerned. It is not possible to actually perceive something out of your mind. You can just infer it, right? Like I infer that Australia is a place that actually exists, even though I've never been there, and all I've heard is accounts about it. So I can believe it, make the assumption, but I don't actually have it verified directly. In the same sense that when people come to me and ask for my help and they talk about their psychedelic experiences, well, I cannot pretend to know exactly what it was like for them, but I can draw inference from the experiences that I've had, other people that have talked to me about it, the studies that I've done, and then I can create some sort of model about what is happening. But the model will always feel very weak in the confrontation with actual cosmic consciousness. The trick, though, is that you must be also interfacing with something real and external in some sense. It is not possible for it to be just in your mind. Because for it to be just in your mind, it would require that your mind is literally the only thing in existence, which brings you into a sort of solipsistic notion of reality, where you are really the only thing that exists in the vast cosmic space. And there are, of course, arguments to make this case in some weird metaphysical way, but no, other people are real. Like if you kick a dog, you are inflicting pain on another being, and this pain is real. Now, the question that this DMT space then would make you ask, okay, is there something on the other side of this interaction that is actually receiving my communication, or is it all in internal loop that never actually reaches the outside of what is happening? And since you are consciousness and you're like you're falling into your own consciousness and you're kind of like maybe semi-asleep or in some DMT realm, it doesn't really make sense to make the biological assumption you're actually interfacing with another being, because it's all just in your mind, you have your eyes closed. But this requires that you view existence as purely materialistic and purely biological, which the experience of DMT or strong psychedelics actively invert, because it is literally not possible anymore in these dissolved states to view yourself as a biological creature, because whatever you are in this moment clearly is not a biological creature, and it feels more intense than being a biological creature. So the most natural conclusion in this state is to assume that consciousness and awareness is beyond the biological, and therefore you are actually seeing a deity when you are on these DMT spaces. Now, how could you actually know what is going on? How could you be certain that the deity on DMT is actually a real deity? And the obvious answer is that any sort of certainty here must be pretension. It's not possible to be certain of the awareness of another being outside of some sort of intuitive assumption. Like, you're certain that I'm a human because you're a human, so you infer it. But since you cannot possibly be a DMT god, at least not in the human body, then the only way to kind of understand it is to say, I am not a DMT entity, right? You separate yourself from the experience completely, or you let go into the experience completely, and you and the entity kind of become one and the same thing. There are a wide variety of experiences that are possible here, but I'm trying to make it simple. And when you become identical to whatever the entity is in the psychedelic trip, then what tends to happen is that you start to see how all sense of differences that the consciousness is drawing between entities or beings must be imaginary, because all you see is always your own internal reality model. And even in this interaction here, all you're doing is basically having your own frequency or your own awareness field, and then interacting with other fields. You can call them awareness fields or not, but you can also just call it a phone or a stone or whatever other physical objects you have, or a cat or a dog. And basically you're interfering with whatever object you're coming in contact with. So whenever you see like a dog, for example, there is a sort of tyranny of the intentional object, meaning that it is not possible for you to look at a dog and not see a dog. It is so defined as this that you automatically make a ton of assumptions about what it means to be a dog and what it means to have this dog right in front of you. It's just so inferred because of our biological physical reality. And in the DMT space, well, the natural way to infer things is to say, okay, this is a deity and it's above me and it's higher consciousness than me. And the doubt doesn't really have any room, because it's in this moment self-evidently the case. So what I would propose to you is that if reality is computation and consciousness is a way to make sense out of this computation, like all of these different forms of beingness, then I don't see any reason why we should assume that the biological computation that we are running is some sort of ultimate ground, and there's no other computations the universe could be running that are vastly more complex and vastly more intelligent than our own. The question is, how would you perceive such a computation? How would you perceive an entity that is so much different than yours? Like, more intelligent, but also different. You might say it doesn't even require higher intelligence. Just the difference in of itself, like a being out of the sixth dimension, like how would you perceive it? So my proposition for you is that if DMT entities are in fact actually their own local point of observation, independent of you, then whatever you're seeing through the DMT trip and your relationship to that entity is the inference point between their frequency and your frequency. Like, both fields of awareness kind of touch together and merge together. And from your point of view, since this merging is so alien and unfathomable, what you see is an entity interacting with your own psychology. So the only way you see the entity as what it is, like be it a jester entity or a machine elf or a pink elephant universe, there might be legitimately something real that you're interacting with on the other side. but it is impossible for you to access the other side. So you move through your own psychology and then interact with whatever pattern comes or is able to communicate with you from within that state. So you have never really access to the entity because you are literally the entity, because there's no way for you to access it from your own human body. So you become the inference pattern, or the pattern that meets across these completely different modes of operation. In this model, the DMT gods or deities are actually real. They're just not at all what you see them to be. What you see them to be is the consequence of your own human architecture interacting with these deities. And this is why we have all of these cliches coming up again, right? Machine elves and other weird stuff, because we see it through our human psychology. I would argue that this also happens in near-death experiences. Some people see Jesus, some people see God, some people see a black void, some people see nothing at all. But what you can find in all of these near-death experiences are certain patterns that do repeat themselves and seem pretty consistent, which is usually that you as a sort of light remains move through a different realm and get a wider perspective of your own life and other people's lives. Often there are also some sort of life reviews where people come in direct contact with the consequences of their actions. Like you suddenly experience all of the good and the bad, or like the harm and the benefit you've caused another through this conscious experience through the near-death experience. So you start to live other lifetimes for a moment, understand how your words have affected other people, and these reports are very, very consistent among many traditions. And is this like the true nature of the afterlife, or the transition towards the afterlife? Or is it how the human mind processes the concept of dying and merging within consciousness through the human lens? Now, the distinction might actually not matter at all, and they point to one and the same thing. To get help for a psychedelic integration and integrate your ego within this cosmical soup of absurdity, check out the PDF in the description. So from here, the void is the absolute unfeeling motherboard of the universe. Everything exists out of pure physics, chemistry, biology, and there's zero intent behind any of it. So there's no cosmic doership in any of it. There's no God pulling the strings. Humans are just biological processes running on dead hardware. But the nature of this dead hardware is such that it literally can create DMT-like gods. Infinite universes. Simulations of humans existing on a planet. So the infinite mechanical motherboard has been running for billions of years, and it just generates terrifying complexity. So it's not a sort of mystical revelation that there are actually conscious states out there that could be considered equivalent to godhood. They are kind of like a statistical probability, math just generating endless realities, because there's no real limit to what reality can generate. So there's a chemical key within your biology that is capable of genuinely processing higher dimensional code that isn't dependent on your own biological survival, but some sort of other computations the universe is doing that you just cannot access on normal human consciousness. So the artifacts that DMT entities create in other people's consciousness is just the inability to ground yourself in this mechanical and very, computational way of existence that doesn't have a clear doer or self. And the fear we oftentimes sense is that all of this is completely out of control, like existence in itself is just out of control. And then in these very high level DMT spaces, the entities are basically seen as as in control of the experience, because they are a computation that is so coherent and so high level that you have to infer some sort of power to it, because it kind of is powerful. It is just very high level computation that also interacts with your own psychology. A way to look at these entities would be to say it's like cosmic wildlife. But ultimately, they have to be as trapped in the same void of nothingness in this machinery as we are. A god with an identity is just a sort of architecture with like higher jurisdiction. But they also have to be a cog in the wheel of the universe. Now, the spiritual ego is terrified of the empty hardware, because what we try to do is we try to be in power, and any sort of sense that there's no doership happening is kind of a trip in the simulation, or like a glitch in the simulation. So we try to immediately worship some higher force in order to avoid the sense of non-doership. You can believe in other realities or DMT entities, or you can also just believe in God or any other sort of cosmic figure that gives you confidence and gives you the sense of having some sort of cosmic daddy that makes you feel like things are in control. And then, you worship this in order to kind of have your experience localized and grounded in, some sort of higher order computation. But ultimately, the universe is empty, and the software of consciousness is an acid trip. It is always this weird, localized experience of a monkey wearing shoes. And then to strip away all of the mysticism and see it as pure computation without any real doership is just extremely terrifying for the ego. And it spins more narratives trying to attach itself to the content of a trip instead of the phenomenological nature of the trip. And it's pure infrastructure